Avoidant partners inflict profound psychological damage on their loved ones without conscious awareness of their destructive impact. Their attachment patterns create systematic erosion of their partner's self-worth, emotional security, and capacity for trust through subtle but persistent behaviors that feel like emotional cuts accumulating over time. These unconscious patterns stem from their deep-seated need to maintain emotional distance and control, but they create cumulative trauma that can take years to heal. Understanding these damaged patterns is crucial for both recognizing when you're being harmed and creating the conditions necessary for genuine healing and healthy relationship development. The death by 1,000 cuts. Avoidants don't typically engage in dramatic displays of cruelty or obvious abuse. Instead, they inflict damage through consistent patterns of emotional neglect, invalidation, and withdrawal that gradually erode their partner's psychological well-being. These behaviors are so ingrained and automatic that they rarely recognize their destructive impact, making the damage feel particularly insidious and difficult to address. The most devastating form of cutting occurs through emotional invalidation and minimization of their partner's feelings and needs. When you express hurt about their emotional distance, they respond with suggestions that you're overthinking or being too sensitive, rather than acknowledging the legitimacy of your feelings. This invalidation creates profound confusion about your own emotional reality as you begin to question whether your reactions are appropriate or whether you're indeed as emotionally unstable as their responses suggest. Over time, this gaslighting effect erodes your confidence in your own perceptions and emotional intelligence, making you increasingly dependent on their validation for basic self-standing. The damage compounds because their invalidation typically occurs during moments when you're most vulnerable and seeking comfort or understanding. When someone consistently responds to your emotional vulnerability with dismissal or minimization, you learn to suppress your authentic emotional expressions and develop chronic self-doubt about your own emotional needs and reactions. Intermittent reinforcement creates another form of devastating psychological damage through patterns that provide just enough emotional availability to maintain your hope, while withholding enough to prevent genuine security. This pattern creates neurochemical addiction to their inconsistent attention while systematically undermining your emotional stability and sense of reality. The unpredictable nature of their emotional availability creates chronic hypervigilance as you constantly monitor their moods and behaviors for signs of their emotional state and availability. This hypervigilance is exhausting and prevents you from relaxing into natural emotional expression and authentic relationship dynamics. Their intermittent availability also creates what therapists call trauma bonding, where the relief you feel during their emotionally present moments becomes neurochemically associated with their presence, making their absence feel like withdrawal from an addictive substance. Perhaps the most insidious form of damage occurs through systematic withholding of emotional nourishment that healthy relationships require. They provide just enough connection to prevent you from leaving while withholding enough to keep you chronically hungry for genuine emotional intimacy and security. This emotional starvation gradually lowers your standards for what constitutes acceptable treatment as you become grateful for minimal effort and basic consideration that should be baseline. The withholding extends to physical affection, verbal affirmation, future planning, and other forms of relationship investment that create security and emotional fulfillment. This systematic deprivation creates chronic feelings of emptiness and unworthiness that you may internalize as personal inadequacy rather than recognizing as natural responses to emotional neglect. Responsibility shifting represents another unconscious cutting pattern where avoidants consistently deflect responsibility for relationship problems onto their partners through subtle blame shifting. They reframe their withdrawal as reasonable responses to your emotional needs, their inconsistency as natural reactions to your expectations, and their inability to commit as evidence of your excessive demands. This responsibility shifting creates profound confusion about the source of relationship problems and prevents you from accurately assessing whether your needs are reasonable or whether their behavior is problematic. The cumulative trauma, long-term psychological damage. The individual instances of emotional cutting that avoidants inflict, might seem minor in isolation, but their cumulative effect creates complex trauma patterns that can persist for years after the relationship ends. This trauma doesn't result from single dramatic events, but from the steady accumulation of emotional neglect, invalidation, and inconsistency that gradually destroys your psychological foundation. Extended exposure to avoidant relationship patterns systematically erodes your sense of inherent worth and value as a partner and person. Their consistent emotional unavailability and minimization of your needs sends the message that you're not worth consistent love and attention, gradually eroding your confidence in your own lovability. The damage to your identity occurs as you gradually modify your personality, emotional expressions, and authentic self to accommodate their discomfort with intimacy and emotional intensity. Over time, you may lose touch with who you are outside of your role as their accommodating partner, developing what therapists call identity diffusion. Their failure to see and appreciate your positive qualities while consistently highlighting your emotional needs as problems creates distorted self-perception, where you begin to view your natural human needs for connection and emotional availability as character flaws rather than normal relationship requirements. The inconsistent emotional availability that characterizes avoidant relationships creates attachment trauma that affects your ability to trust and feel secure in future relationships. Your nervous system becomes conditioned to expect emotional withdrawal and abandonment, creating hypervigilance and anxiety even in healthier relationship contexts. The trauma includes developing what therapists call earned anxious attachment, where previously secure individuals develop anxious attachment patterns as adaptive responses to inconsistent and emotionally unavailable partnerships. Trust issues extend beyond romantic relationships to friendships, family connections, and professional relationships as you struggle to believe that people will remain emotionally available and consistent when you express needs or vulnerability. The avoidant relationship teaches you that emotional expression often leads to withdrawal and rejection, creating lasting patterns of emotional suppression and self-protection. Living with chronic emotional uncertainty and intermittent reinforcement disrupts your natural emotional regulation systems and creates ongoing difficulties managing stress, anxiety, and emotional intensity. Your nervous system becomes chronically activated due to constant uncertainty about your partner's emotional availability and the relationship's security. The damage includes developing hypervigilance about others' emotional states and relationship dynamics that prevents you from relaxing into natural emotional expression and authentic connection. Extended exposure to avoidant relationship dynamics distorts your understanding of what healthy relationships look like and what you should expect from romantic partnerships. You may develop tolerance for treatment that doesn't meet your emotional needs while losing the ability to recognize genuinely available and emotionally healthy partners. The pattern distortion includes accepting minimal effort as evidence of love, viewing emotional consistency as boring or clingy, and feeling more attracted to people who create uncertainty and emotional challenge rather than security and stability. The invisible wounds. Recognizing emotional damage. Recognizing the damage caused by avoidant partners can be particularly challenging because their harm often feels subtle, and their behaviors can be rationalized as personality differences or relationship challenges rather than acknowledged as systematic emotional abuse. The invisible nature of these wounds makes them difficult to identify and address, often leaving you questioning your own perceptions and emotional responses. Chronic self-doubt becomes one of the most persistent symptoms of avoidant relationship damage, manifesting as constant questioning of your own emotional reactions, needs, and perceptions. You may find yourself wondering whether you're being too sensitive, too demanding, or too emotional in response to treatment that healthy individuals would recognize as inadequate or harmful. This self-doubt extends beyond the relationship to other areas of your life, affecting your confidence in professional decisions, friendships, and personal choices. Emotional numbness often develops as a protective mechanism against continued disappointment and hurt. After experiencing repeated cycles of hope and disappointment, your emotional system may begin to shut down as a survival strategy. You might find yourself feeling disconnected from your own emotions, unable to access joy or excitement, or struggling to feel deeply about things that previously mattered to you. Hypervigilance about others' emotional states becomes an exhausting constant as you develop heightened sensitivity to mood changes, subtle signs of withdrawal, or potential rejection in all your relationships. This hypervigilance represents your nervous system's attempt to protect you from future emotional harm by detecting threats early, but it prevents you from relaxing into natural emotional connection and spontaneous interaction. Difficulty expressing needs directly often develops as you learn that expressing emotional needs frequently leads to invalidation, withdrawal, or blame. You may find yourself hinting at needs rather than stating them clearly, apologizing for having needs at all, or completely suppressing your requirements to avoid triggering others' discomfort or rejection. Relationship anxiety extends beyond your romantic partnership to create general anxiety about all relationships as you struggle to believe that people will remain present and available when challenges arise. You may find yourself constantly seeking reassurance about others' feelings toward you or interpreting normal relationship fluctuations as signs of impending abandonment. Physical symptoms often accompany emotional damage, including chronic headaches, digestive issues, sleep disturbances, or other stress-related health problems that reflect the toll that emotional uncertainty and hypervigilance take on your physical system. These symptoms may persist even after the relationship ends, representing your body's ongoing response to chronic emotional stress. Loss of personal interests and goals frequently occurs as you become increasingly focused on managing the relationship and accommodating your partner's emotional limitations. Activities that once brought you joy may feel meaningless, and personal goals may seem unimportant compared to the constant work of trying to create connection with someone who resists emotional intimacy. Building healthy relationships, the foundation of recovery. Creating healthy relationships after experiencing avoidant partner damage requires intentional healing work, boundary development, and conscious choice to pursue connections with emotionally available people. This process involves both individual recovery and learning to recognize and build genuinely healthy relationship dynamics that support rather than undermine your emotional well-being. The foundation for healthy relationships begins with comprehensive individual healing work that addresses the trauma and damage created by avoidant relationship patterns. This healing process often requires professional support and significant time investment to undo the psychological damage and rebuild emotional confidence and self-worth. Trauma therapy, specifically addressing attachment wounds and relationship trauma, helps process the complex emotions and beliefs developed during avoidant relationships. Modalities like EMDR, somatic therapy, or specialized attachment therapy can address the nervous system activation and trauma responses that persist after these relationships end. The goal isn't just to understand what happened intellectually, but to process the emotional and physical impact of chronic emotional neglect and invalidation until your system can relax and trust again. Identity reconstruction work involves rediscovering who you are outside of your role as an accommodating partner and rebuilding confidence in your own perceptions, needs, and emotional intelligence. This process often includes journaling, therapy, and conscious exploration of your authentic preferences and values. You need to reconnect with the person you were before the relationship or discover who you're becoming as you heal from its impact. Boundary development becomes crucial for protecting yourself from future emotional damage while learning to recognize and enforce your own limits and requirements in relationships. This includes both practical boundaries about behavior you will and won't accept, and emotional boundaries about how much you'll accommodate others' limitations without reciprocal consideration for your needs. Learning to recognize genuine emotional availability becomes essential for building healthy relationships that can support your healing and growth rather than recreating previous damage patterns. This involves developing skills to assess potential partners' emotional capacity early in relationship development before you become deeply invested in someone who cannot meet your fundamental needs. Emotional availability indicators include consistent communication patterns that don't fluctuate dramatically based on their mood or convenience. Ability to discuss feelings and relationship issues openly without becoming defensive or withdrawing. Demonstration of empathy and consideration for your emotional state during both good times and challenging periods. Willingness to work through conflicts rather than avoiding or minimizing difficult conversations. Consistent behavior across different contexts and time periods indicates genuine emotional capacity rather than temporary performance designed to secure your interest. Emotionally available partners maintain their considerate and communicative behavior during stress, conflict, and routine periods rather than only during pursuit phases or when they want something from you. Integration into their life and social circles demonstrates their comfort with acknowledged partnership and commitment rather than compartmentalization that keeps you separate from their broader life context. Healthy partners naturally include you in their world rather than maintaining strict boundaries between their relationship and other life areas that suggest shame or ambivalence about your connection. Creating secure relationship dynamics. Building secure relationship dynamics requires conscious effort from both partners to prioritize emotional safety, consistent communication, and mutual support that create security rather than anxiety and uncertainty. These dynamics must be established and maintained through ongoing attention rather than assumed to develop naturally over time. Communication consistency involves establishing regular, open dialogue about feelings, needs, and relationship dynamics that allows both partners to express authenticity without fear of withdrawal or rejection. Healthy relationships include ongoing conversation about individual needs and relationship health, with both partners feeling safe to raise concerns or express vulnerability without triggering defensive responses or emotional shutdown. This communication includes regular check-ins about relationship satisfaction, individual emotional states, and any adjustments needed to maintain mutual well-being. Partners in healthy relationships can discuss problems while they're still small, rather than allowing issues to build until they become major conflicts or sources of resentment. Emotional responsibility means both partners taking accountability for their own emotional states and reactions while also considering their impact on their partner's emotional well-being. This includes avoiding blame and defensiveness while working collaboratively to address conflicts and challenges. Each person owns their emotional responses while also taking responsibility for how their behavior affects their partner. Healthy partners understand that while they cannot control their partner's emotions, they can influence their partner's emotional state through their choices and behaviors. This awareness leads to conscious consideration of how their actions might affect their partner's well-being and adjustment of behavior accordingly. Mutual support systems involve both partners providing emotional availability during difficult times while also maintaining individual support networks that don't place entire emotional responsibility on the romantic relationship. Healthy partnerships complement rather than replace other important relationships, and both partners encourage each other's connections with friends and family. This mutual support includes celebrating each other's achievements, providing comfort during setbacks, and working together to solve problems, rather than one partner consistently carrying the emotional labor for both people. Support flows both ways based on changing needs, rather than one person always giving while the other always receives. Conflict resolution skills become essential for navigating disagreements and challenges without damaging the relationship's emotional safety or security. This includes learning to discuss problems without personal attacks, working toward mutually acceptable solutions rather than trying to win arguments, and repairing emotional connection after conflicts rather than allowing resentment to build. Healthy conflict resolution also involves the ability to take breaks when emotions become too intense, return to discussions when both partners are calm, and find compromises that honor both people's needs rather than one person consistently sacrificing for the other's comfort. Trust building occurs through consistent behavior over time that demonstrates reliability, honesty, and consideration for each other's emotional well-being. Trust develops gradually through repeated experiences of emotional safety and consistent care rather than dramatic gestures or promises that aren't backed up by sustained action. This trust includes both partners being reliable in their commitments, honest about their feelings and experiences, and consistent in their treatment of each other regardless of external stresses or mood fluctuations. Trust also means both partners can be vulnerable without fear of having that vulnerability used against them later. Establishing healthy standards and boundaries. Protecting yourself from future damage requires establishing clear standards and boundaries that prevent you from accepting treatment that doesn't support your emotional well-being and relationship goals. These standards must be based on your understanding of what healthy relationships require rather than adjusted to accommodate others' limitations. Non-negotiable standards should include requirements for emotional availability that doesn't fluctuate dramatically based on their convenience or comfort level. Consistent communication that includes both partners feeling safe to express their needs and concerns. Respect for your feelings and needs that includes genuine consideration rather than dismissal or minimization. Willingness to work on relationship issues rather than avoiding or minimizing them when problems arise. These standards protect you from settling for relationships that cannot meet your basic emotional needs, while ensuring that you invest your energy in connections that have genuine potential for growth and mutual satisfaction. Your standards should reflect what you know healthy relationships require rather than what you hope someone might eventually become capable of providing. Behavioral boundaries involve specific limits about what treatment you will and won't accept, including consequences for boundary violations that you're prepared to enforce consistently. These boundaries protect you from emotional manipulation, gaslighting, and other harmful behaviors that you've experienced in previous relationships. Boundaries might include refusing to accept blame for others' emotional states, not tolerating inconsistent communication patterns, requiring respect for your emotional needs rather than dismissal or minimization, maintaining your right to express concerns about relationship dynamics without being labeled as demanding or oversensitive. Communication requirements should include expectations for how conflicts are handled, how emotions are discussed, and how relationship issues are addressed. Healthy partners should be able to engage in difficult conversations without becoming defensive, withdrawing, or minimizing your concerns about legitimate relationship problems. These requirements ensure that both partners can maintain emotional honesty and work through challenges together rather than one person consistently avoiding difficult topics while the other carries all the emotional labor for relationship maintenance and problem solving. Time and energy boundaries protect your resources from being depleted by partners who cannot reciprocate your emotional investment adequately. This includes limits on how much emotional labor you'll provide without receiving adequate support and consideration in return, and ensuring that your time and attention are valued rather than taken for granted. Maintaining your healing journey. Building and maintaining healthy relationships after avoidant partner damage requires ongoing commitment to growth, healing, and conscious choice-making that prioritizes emotional well-being and genuine partnership over familiar but dysfunctional patterns. This journey doesn't end once you find a healthier relationship. It requires continued vigilance and self-care. Regular self-assessment helps you monitor your emotional state and relationship satisfaction to ensure you're not gradually accepting less than you need or returning to old patterns of overgiving or accommodating unhealthy behavior. This includes checking in with yourself about whether your needs are being met, whether you feel emotionally safe and valued, and whether the relationship is supporting your growth rather than requiring you to minimize yourself. Individual therapy or personal development work should continue even within healthy relationships to support your ongoing healing and growth while preventing regression into old patterns or acceptance of inadequate treatment. Your healing journey is ongoing, and maintaining professional support helps ensure continued progress. Support network maintenance ensures you have emotional resources and perspective outside your romantic relationship that can provide reality checks, encouragement, and support during challenging times. Healthy relationships should enhance rather than replace your other important connections, and maintaining strong friendships and family relationships provides balance and perspective. Boundary maintenance requires ongoing vigilance to ensure you continue enforcing your standards and limits rather than gradually accepting less than you need or deserve as relationships develop and change over time. It's easy to slowly compromise your boundaries when you care about someone, so regular attention to maintaining your limits is essential. Most importantly, commitment to your own emotional well-being must remain the foundation for all relationship decisions, ensuring that you choose connections that support your healing and growth rather than recreating familiar but harmful patterns. Your well-being cannot be sacrificed for anyone else's comfort or to maintain relationships that don't serve your highest good. The journey from avoidant relationship damage to healthy partnership is challenging but entirely possible with proper support, clear boundaries, and commitment to choosing relationships that honor your worth. Understanding how avoidants unconsciously damage their partners provides a framework for healing while building relationships that celebrate rather than diminish your emotional capacity and authentic self.